morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Now, we wanted to get started this morning in talking about all that Barbados is doing all across the world, not just here on island or across the region. And to join us in this conversation is a familiar face. Of course, we have Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. He joins us every single Tuesday. Today's no different. His Excellency David Comissiong. Good morning to you, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, Tisha. Thank you very much.
Great to have you here with us. And I see that you are fitting in very well with our updated decor to suit independence.
Yes, and we are kind of matching. I don't know, it's a spiritual thing.
It's true, as we often do, we often match. All right, so, we were talking even before we came on air about the role Barbados is playing on the global stage. And oftentimes we look on and we might feature tidbits of what's happening in the news. But to generally see the place Barbados is taking on the international stage, a leadership role really in, all manner of issues is truly heartwarming.
Yes, and what caused me to think about this is that right now, the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the COP29, is taking place in Azerbaijan. In fact, we are now into the second week of COP29, and of course, we all saw the clip of Prime Minister Motley making her address to COP29, and I hope we can play a little bit of her statement. So here is Barbados playing its role in the fight against global warming, and much of what she says and much of what is echoed by several other speakers is rooted in the Bridgetown Initiative. This vehicle for reforming the international financial and economic order that Barbados is championing. And then in the first week of COP, in fact, I think the first day of the COP conference, we get this announcement that Barbados, along with France and Kenya, will be leading a coalition of countries fighting for global Solidarity Levies on the carbon-producing industries. And it just brought to my mind this remarkable role that our little Caribbean country is playing in so many areas of international affairs. So, we could get into a deeper discussion on that as we go along.
Absolutely. What does it mean for Barbados generally? Because we talked about being seen on the international stage. What does that mean in real terms as we talk about what Barbados will be able to do, whether through trade, development, adapting certain best practices, making linkages? What does it mean for the average Barbadian?
Well, even beyond just the average Barbadian, let's first of all make the point that Barbados is trying hard to save the entire Earth, humanity, from a global catastrophe, climate change, where if the rise in the Earth's temperature, in the world's temperature, breaches that 1.5 degree increase, or even the 2 degree, or Lord help us, a 3 degree increase, it is going to mean catastrophic consequences for all of us. But okay, if you want to bring it down to the average Barbadian, our advocacy thus far over the last 2 to 3 years has delivered to Barbados. For example, we got an increase in our stock of IMF special drawing rights that translated to something like close to $100 million dollars, right, in bolstering our access to foreign currency. Through our advocacy, we were able to get the IMF to reduce the surcharges that they charge on loans to developing countries. That reduced the interest payments that we are making to the IMF. Through our advocacy, we have gotten international institutions to more embrace debt swaps, and we have seen how we have benefited from two debt swaps. We have gotten the international financial institutions to embrace the ideas of debt pause clauses that have gone into, that we have been putting into our debt instruments, so that if we are hit, God forbid, by a natural disaster, we can actually pause, the payments on our international debt for 2 years. So we have seen some very real benefits for Barbados. We are now the president of UNCTAD. We were the first small island developing state to actually host UNCTAD 15, that was held right here in Barbados, and we assumed the presidency for 4 years. We are now working with the UNCTAD Secretariat, not only to put in place across the board internationally, better trade and development terms for small island developing states like Barbados and the other CARICOM countries, but we are getting them to kind of repurpose the UNCTAD Secretariat so that they will work more closely with our CARICOM institutions, but also, even our national institutions. So there are tremendous benefits all across the board, but the latest one, right now at COP, there's all kind of deadlock. But we have come up with this idea, look, there's a way, we can find a way to generating more resources for small developing countries through this idea of solidarity levies. And, and we have been able to get not just developing countries in the coalition, but developed countries, France, Spain, and Denmark. So this, to my mind, is one of the really bright spots of this current COP, even as we are hoping that this week, the second week, they're going to break much of the deadlock, and this COP will actually deliver some real results. But we can rack up at least one achievement thus far, and that is that coalition that will be led by Barbados, France, and Kenya to put in place these new taxes on the carbon-producing industries that generate great profits: aviation, shipping, the oil and gas industry, and that will produce real resources that developing countries like Barbados can use.
All right, so let's listen in as PM Motley presented on the, all the dangers of a climate catastrophe at COP29.
Climate crisis. We are in a season of superlatives, and the reality is that these extreme weather events that the world is facing daily suggest that humanity and the planet are hurtling towards catastrophe. The extreme weather requires from us a serious commitment at this COP with respect to new collective quantified goals that enable us to reverse the current trajectory and to fund mitigation, adaptation, and of course loss and damage. My friends, every COP must make progress irrespective of the geopolitical dynamics. There is an urgent need to reform this COP process, and I hope that we can meet that as we go forward.
All right, so that was PM Motley's presentation at COP29.
That was her sounding the alarm at the very beginning of this COP. And she has emerged as the most powerful political voice on the international scene on this issue of the climate crisis, global warming. And in her address, her short address, she actually laid out what needs to be the agenda for this COP, because she made the point about that this COP needs to be used to seriously capitalize the loss and damage fund that will provide resources for countries, especially developing countries, that are hit by these negative consequences of global warming. She made the case in her speech, Tisha, for those Solidarity Levies on the carbon producing industries, and that was delivered virtually a day or two after. She made the case for a global agreement on methane. She says that we are overlooking the very serious effect of this greenhouse gas, methane, and that the world needs to come up with a special agreement to deal with it. She made the case for a global carbon market to be established, and this is where, you know, countries that do things that reduce greenhouse gases. For example, a country might engage in reforestation, or a country might phase out a coal-powered plant and replace it with a renewable energy source, that you get a credit. You get a carbon credit for that, which you can trade and monetize. So this incentivizes countries and companies to really go in that direction. So she laid out the whole agenda for what this COP should achieve, and we can only hope that, you know, her words of urgency and encouragement bear fruit.
We're right there alongside many of our Caribbean sister countries as well, and we know that there was a very strong message presented from the leader of Grenada on how important it is for us to move forward as partners in this global fight against climate change.
Yes, well, you know, Grenada just experienced the devastation of Hurricane Beryl, the earliest Category 5 hurricane ever in the Atlantic hurricane season. So it's important to hear the message that Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell took to COP this year.
The president of COP29, esteemed colleagues, distinguished leaders, I extend Grenada's appreciation to the COP presidency for its commitment to leading us through this pivotal moment in our shared climate journey. Grenada, and by extension CARICOM, stand ready to work in partnership with you toward a successful and truly impactful COP29. What do you say in 2 minutes, 30 seconds that makes a difference? I lead a country that this year experienced, for the first half of the year, a 15-year drought. And then on the first day of the second half of the year, experienced the earliest Category 5 hurricane that devastated our islands of CARICOM and Petit Martin. And at this very moment, as I stand here, yet again, my island is being devastated by flash flooding, landslides, and deluge of excessive rainfall, all in the space of a matter of a couple hours. That is the reality lived by small island developing states. And so it takes a lot of courage to come to this event. In fact, it's my first, it may be my last. The reality is, we're not here to beg. We're not here to ask for sympathy. We are here to say that it's one planet. It may be small island developing states today. It will be Spain tomorrow. It will be Florida the day after. It's one planet.
And that is indeed a strong message because, you know, from a lot of quarters, it seemed as though it's been a small island developing state thing, but we're seeing the differences on major continents as well.
Yes. Yeah, the effects are global, and Prime Minister Motley actually began with that we are now living in an age of superlatives. You know, today is the hottest day on record, the greatest flood, you know, the greatest drought, and that's climate change. You know, where it can swing from, as the Prime Minister said, Prime Minister of Grenada, half of the year they experience a drought, and then suddenly they're hit with this tremendous hurricane. So yes, partnership, we're all in this together. I think that was the crux of his message. You developing countries that have been so reluctant, you who caused this problem, you have been so reluctant to make the resources available to countries that did not cause the problem but are suffering the effects, for us to do adaptation to this climate crisis and mitigation. But you need to bear in mind that we're not asking you for charity, because we share this planet. And all of us are being affected by climate change. So the resources that you put forward, that we can put these measures in place, they're not only going to benefit us, they're going to benefit you as well. It's a partnership. And you know, one of the main issues at COP right now that has been reported is a lot of anguish about what a new Trump presidency will mean for the whole climate change agenda. And here, big news coming out of COP was this interview that Prime Minister Motley gave with the Guardian newspaper of Britain, where she says, she stepped up and said, look, I would like to meet with President Trump so that we could have a discussion and I could explain to him the gravity of this climate crisis, and why it will be important that we have that kind of partnership that Prime Minister Mitchell is speaking about. And so we can only hope that President Trump will respond positively to Prime Minister Motley's offer or request for a meeting to discuss the gravity of global warming for the entire world community.
All right. In terms of this position that Barbados now holds with the chairmanship of the Forum for Climate Vulnerable Countries, a so-called V20, what really is the next step for that, the cut and thrust of what will be done with this chairmanship, or what are your general hopes?
Well, bear in mind that Barbados is now at the lead of several initiatives. The Bridgetown Initiative, which we crafted here in Barbados, and we have undertaken responsibility for leading. And incidentally, the beauty of the Bridgetown Initiative is that we are building a global movement behind these ideas for reform of the entire international system, so that we can better deal with the climate crisis, we can deal with issues of human development. Of course, we are the president of UNCTAD, and we're trying to move UNCTAD in that direction as well. But you have mentioned a third initiative that we are chairing. We have just this year, we assumed the chairmanship of the Forum of Climate Vulnerable Countries, or the V20. It started as 20 countries back in 2015, and Barbados was a founder member. But the number of countries now is actually 68. But they still keep the name the V20. And basically, what we are trying to do with our chairmanship of the V20 is basically to have the V20 focus on the critical issues that you find in the Bridgetown Initiative, and the whole idea is these kinds of demands, if they are to be successful, if you are actually to make a breakthrough, it will require focus. It will require mobilizing strength around the demands. It's okay just to put demands out there or ideas out there, but if you don't bring partners together to focus on achieving them and to bring their clout behind the achievement of them, it is not going to happen. And so we are seeing that that approach of establishing the demands, but then mobilizing countries to focus on them, has proven to be very successful. Our ambassador, Elizabeth Thompson, she has been charged with basically undertaking the duties for Barbados's leadership, 2-year leadership of the V20 countries. And yes, so we are looking forward, we are looking forward to see that coalition playing a very big role in helping to drive through and achieve some of these demands that are so well known through our championship of the Bridgetown Initiative.
How much closer are we to the $1 trillion per year mark that we need to be able to tackle climate issues? I believe many countries have pledged, not nearly enough. I think at last count it was around 700 million. But
there was a pledge of 700 million for the loss and damage fund, which is nowhere near what it needs to be.
Yeah. So how much closer are we to getting the interest of larger countries to be able to meet this $1 trillion a year mark that is needed?
Right. So it's two things. We are saying that the international community needs to generate at least $1 trillion US dollars every year to be available for investment in climate mitigation and climate adaptation projects, if we are to have a chance of keeping the global rise in temperature to no more than 1.5, right? So that's the overall figure of financial resources that are required. A subset of that is the loss and damage fund. And we managed to finally get the loss and damage fund. So the loss and damage fund will basically be resources that are there for countries, especially developing countries that did not cause the problem but are suffering catastrophic effects, that where we suffer damage, we can get compensation. So there are two things. So there's the overall stock of financial resources to go towards dealing with the climate problem through investments. And then there is the loss and damage fund. So right now, one of the big issues at this COP is, in the past, we have said, we should be doing 100 billion every year to go for resources to go towards climate change in general. And we are saying 100 billion is not enough. It needs to be, we need to be aiming for $1 trillion. So the question is that they're discussing in Azerbaijan, can we get all the countries of the world to buy into this idea of making $1 trillion available? I guess we have to wait and see if we are successful in that. But secondly, this loss and damage fund, we set it up last year, but you only pledged 700 million, which is nowhere close to what is required. I mean, just Hurricane Beryl, the damage that was done to St. Vincent, Grenada, Barbados, Jamaica. We should be getting resources from that loss and damage fund to help rebuild, for example, our fishing fleet, you see? So these are the issues that right now they are discussing. It has been reported that there's been a lot of deadlock, but that in this second week of COP, the ministers, the people with political clout, will be joining the discussions, and hopefully they will bring their political authority to bear, and they will not want this COP to go down as a failure, and that we will get some positive results. So I guess we just have to wait and see, and what transpires over the next 2 or 3 days.
Again, how does this, because you mentioned it briefly, the newly established Coalition for Solidarity Levies on carbon-intensive industries. You mentioned aviation, oil and gas. You also mentioned shipping. What role do the leaders see that this will play in trying to, garner much of that money that they need, considering that we've seen considerable profits, even over COVID, with industries such as the oil and gas specifically? Right.
But that's precisely it. You see, because the whole COP process, this UN process, everybody's at the table. There are all kinds of competing agendas and interests, and you can see how difficult it is to get consensus and to make progress. But this bright idea, look, that does not have to be the only, the only process. You can actually bring together a coalition of the willing. And the brilliance of this coalition for these solidarity levies is that you have brought together not just developing countries, but also developed countries. So you have France in the leadership of it. You have Spain as a member of the coalition. You have Denmark. You also have Germany. Germany has assumed observer status within that coalition. So presumably, even while you wait for these big achievements with the whole COP process, if through that coalition you could make a start, these countries that are on board with the coalition, you can put those taxes in place and begin to extract capital resources that could go towards things like loss and damage, that could go towards things like providing resources that small island developing states could deal with adaptation to all the negative effects, the rising sea levels, the increasingly violent hurricanes, the sargassum seaweed, the droughts, all of the attack on our reefs and so forth, all of the negative things that we need money to be able to respond to. So I think that this COP has already been, quote unquote, successful, if only because this coalition was launched at this COP, because it means that the countries that are part of this coalition can move ahead, can put some of these levies or taxes in place and generate resources that can come to countries that really need those resources.
All right, I want to thank you so much, as always, for sharing with us. Of course, we'll still keep our eyes on what's happening at COP29 as we complete this second week. You can listen out for nightly updates right here on TV8 during the evening news and during our news update for the World at One. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
And just to say, Tisha, although we focus on COP today, just bear in mind that CARICOM is meeting with the President of India in Guyana tomorrow, and then that will be followed by Heads of Government Summit on the issue of crime and violence. And so perhaps next week we could make a report on those two very important CARICOM initiatives. Absolutely,
I look forward to it, especially on the day that we've heard an announcement about the new pollution levels in Delhi being worse than they ever have been. I'm sure that will play a role in what is discussed as well. So look forward to sharing with you next week.
Thank you.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to